My name is Deborah Freeman. As I think you know, I'm Lyndon LaRouche's national spokeswoman. And on behalf of Mr. LaRouche and LPAC, I'd like to welcome all of you to today's event. There was no way we possibly could have known when we scheduled this event that it would come at such an incredible moment in time, when the crises that we have been discussing, the crises that Mr. LaRouche forecasts, would all come to a head in what seems to be a single moment. And in that single moment, it is also the case, and it is increasingly clear to people in the United States and indeed all over the world, that the only functioning economist who has an overview of what caused this crisis and of how to fix it is Lyndon LaRouche. There are so many things I could say in introducing him, but because I know that all of you and our listening audience via the internet are very anxious to hear from him, I'll save those comments for later. And now what I'd like to do is present to you Lyndon LaRouche.
Thank you. There are two topics which I shall address today, apart from what I shall treat as questions come in as I respond to those questions. The first will be on the immediate crisis. The second will be on what we do if we succeed in installing the policy which is needed to deal with this crisis. The first part is elementary, and the second part is scientific. Now, we have a piece of legislation in the form of an amendment, and there's some other legislation around it in the Congress. It's a legislation sponsored by a group of leading Republicans and Democrats who are determined that this policy of Obama's shall not go through. That the legislation, as Obama intends, will be blocked, and he will fail. And this may probably be the actual approach to the end of his function as president. Now, what has happened is not a domestic U.S. affair. It is a domestic U.S. affair, but it's not in nature a domestic U.S. affair. What's happened is the entire British system. The British system is not the British monarchy, though the British monarchy itself is a part of that system. It's the international financial system, which is under the leadership of Jacob Rothschild as an agent of the British monarchy. The core of this thing is called the Inter-Alpha Group. Now, the Inter-Alpha Group's chief victim, officially, is the euro. All the nations which are part of the euro are the first target of disaster. However, the controlling feature of this euro system has been, since the end of 1989, has been the British system. The euro system is a puppet of the British Empire. The most powerful influence in the British Empire financially has been centered in the group called the Inter-Alpha Group, with many different kinds of extensions, whose power is located largely among the pirates of the Caribbean. For example, the people who own Russia today, financially, have their headquarters in the Caribbean, and they are pirates. Their offices are there. And the Russian economy is presently controlled by pirates of the Caribbean. Some of them speak Russian, like in Antigua. You can't get a whole hotel room if you don't have a Russian accent. So that's the nature of the situation. So what has happened is this. The attempt to pull a swindle, which apparently is successful in one sense, using a bailout of Greece to try to wreck the nations of the continent of Europe, the Euro group, has backfired and has struck at the heart of the system, the Euro system, which is controlled by the British monarchy, the British Empire. What happened on Thursday, for example, in the United States, was a reflection of this. We are approaching a point which is coinciding with the Greek bailout issue, which is a fake. Greece should not have been bailed out. They should have, as a sovereign nation, gone through a reorganization of their finances under sovereign direction. Trying to pull all Europe into support of a Greek bailout was the intention to ruin all of Europe simultaneously. Now, we did what we could to cause that to backfire, and it did backfire. It's backfired. And there was a mood shift in Europe, including in the German election campaign in North Rhine-Westphalia during the past week or 2 weeks. A sudden shift in the mood expressed in the population, which is a reflection of this process. What happened is the gambling on Wall Street was intermingled with a superior force which controls Wall Street. Wall Street is controlled by the British Empire. It is not an American possession. So now what you're seeing as the US crisis is really the British crisis, because the British system is about to blow. It has reached the point of blowing. So what happened was, essentially, the Obama administration, Obama himself is a British puppet. He's not really an American. He may be American by birth, that's a highly debated subject, but nonetheless, he's nominally American. But he's not American in spirit, or in direction, or ownership. He's owned by the British Empire via the rotten British extension into Chicago. He's a puppet. So this puppet is going to be ordered to try to assist the British at the expense of the United States in this process. What has happened, not everybody in the United States is either stupid or a traitor. There are some people here in politics who are not traitors. And this happens to include a couple of people, such as the Senator John McCain and Senator Maria Cantwell and others, Feingold and others. And they are not going to sit by and see the United States destroyed. So they have moved to jam up the so-called Dodd Bill. The front end of the Dodd Bill is, the change of the Dodd Bill is already stuck in there, another piece of legislation inside the Senate proceedings. But you have a determined group of people who know that the British system is about to collapse, and know that if the United States does not take appropriate action to defend the United States against a collapse of the British system, we go down. So therefore, the people behind McCain, Cantwell, and so forth are acting not as factitious politicians, they're acting as patriots. And the guys who oppose them are not acting as patriots. Because if the British system goes down, the Euro system goes down, as it will go down, one way or the other, it's doomed. This system is finished, and nobody can save it. The question is, are we going to go down with it? And those in Wall Street who support the president's policy on this are the traitors, because they're willing to sacrifice the United States for the interests of Britain. So you have some patriots in the United States. Take John McCain. What is John McCain? He's a Republican. That is not what's important about him. He's a soldier or sailor. He comes from several generations of leading figures in the U.S. naval tradition. He's a patriot. What he's reacting to is not a question of factitious advantage for one political party or interest or another. He's reacting as a patriot. So is Maria Cantwell. And so are others, Feingold and so forth, involved in this. They're acting as patriots to mobilize a defense of the United States against the oncoming total collapse of the international financial monetary system in its present form. Because if we defend the United States system against our incumbent president, among others, and Europe goes down, we in the United States can launch the recovery of Europe by extending the Glass-Steagall system, which we intend to reimpose here now, into Europe. We can cause a recovery of Europe. What's the situation here? Most of what people consider financial assets are totally worthless. They're derivatives. They're gambling. They're side bets on gambling side bets. They do not represent real physical economic assets. They're frauds. We're talking about hundreds, maybe of quadrillions of nominal dollars out there as the world's financial assets and debt, which ain't worth nothing. And it's gambling. It's like as if you took the game of Monopoly and you brought the game of Monopoly into Wall Street, and now you play with Monopoly money. And you declare you have a great victory. And then somebody comes and asks and pay the bill for the whatever they're serving that night, and they don't have any real money. They have only Monopoly money. What happens? The game is over. And that's what we're dealing with. You're dealing with a system which is based on monopoly money. All these financial derivatives, this vast amount of money, all this bailout is all fake and fraudulent. So what do? We use a Glass-Steagall approach. We take the entire system, re-establish Glass-Steagall, and under Glass-Steagall, we cancel all the monopoly money. And we defend the integrity of legitimate obligations of the type we have in regular banks. Now, what's happened since 2007, especially since 2008, we have destroyed the integrity of the banking system. It was done deliberately by a crazy gentleman from up near Cape Cod in Massachusetts, who is not very sane and he's not very intelligible. But he's a stinking nuisance, nonetheless. So we have destroyed what we could have saved. In other words, in 2007, in the summer of 2007, when I specified this, we could have then acted without any great crisis to stabilize the U.S. economy. We didn't do it because of Barney Frank and what he represented, what was behind him. So we didn't do what we should have done. This rolled over with the beginning of a series of swindles into what happened in 2008. That was under Bush. Then we went, in order to cover the crimes we had committed, we went to bailout. And so now we have a hungry and desperate U.S. population by and large. They're on the verge of mass starvation, literally, a total breakdown. And the question is, who do we support? Do we support the people of the United States? Do we support essential industries? Do we support municipalities and their functioning? Do we support the nation itself? Or do we support foreigners, the bailout monsters, who typify by the British Empire? We make that choice. We say, well, we don't owe you guys a thing. We have a constitution, and what's been happening to us is a violation of our constitution. We do as Roosevelt did when Roosevelt saved the United States from a correspondingly similar catastrophe in 1933 by Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall is not some wild innovation. It's simply the principle of the Constitution, the U.S. federal Constitution. But it needed a specific law addressed to a specific situation to defend our nation against this threat. And that's Glass-Steagall. Now you had Larry Summers, who was a mental case, got in there with a morals case called Geithner, and that didn't help anything at all. So now we've reached the point where we're part of a British system, the whole international system. You don't know who owns what. It's like a vast game at the electronic speed, and very complicated games where people are hedging against other people. They're trying to come up with a hedge against a hedge against a hedge against a hedge. So what happened on Thursday is the intensity of trying to cover their butt against the British collapse occurred. It blew out. The whole thing blew out because it was no longer controllable. It was an incalculable development occurred. But it was pre-calculable that it would occur when you take into account the insanity of the people who have been running the banking system and the financial system in the United States and the insanity of the current president. There was no provision to avoid this. So we had a total collapse of the salt market on Thursday. What caused it? The British crisis. The British crisis. What do you get as a reaction? Now, as I said, I made certain remarks about John McCain and Maria Cantwell, take McCain in particular. So he's a patriot. Now, what is emerging now is a split and reorganization of the two leading parties. And who knows what other complications may occur to them. What you have now is you have a Republican Democratic faction typified by McCain and Cantwell. They're only typified. And this is a rapidly growing movement among leading politicians inside the United States on both sides of the aisle. The leadership that is opposing the Obama plan and the British is admittedly still a nominal minority. But with the backing of the American people, it is no longer a minority. Now, what's the backing of the American people? All those people you saw in August of 2009 out there saying, we want to kill you, to the politicians that they had elected. You betrayed us. We want to kill you over health care. So now you've got a situation in which the population will not sustain the nominal majority for Obama in the Congress. The population itself will not sustain and support that. They will capitulate it to it or not. And when they're clear that they have a target by means of which they can challenge this, they will do it. What they want is they want well-known leading political figures or similar figures of the United States to step forward as a group and say, we think the time has come to stop this nonsense. Then the majority of the people of the United States right now are ready to support any political leadership which they consider credible, which is willing to do that. And therefore you have John McCain and Cantwell, the senators, with their associates, are now in like a avalanche rolling down the side of a mountain and picking up material, steam, and numbers as it goes. They are now determined to put a block on any effort to thrust through a Dodd bill without the Glass-Steagall in it. They will jam up the works, and they have the ability to do so. And we're also in the process where behind them is the sight, clearly more visible, roaring more loudly, of the avalanche sliding down the mountain slope. It's a matter of timing. There will be an overwhelming majority in the United States, a patriotic majority, which is spreading rapidly, spreading like wildfire right now, implicitly unstoppable, which is going to be behind the McCain-Cantwell-led opposition. We will probably have a Glass-Steagall vote soon in the political process, or the equivalent of a Glass-Steagall vote. We will also have alarmed the British by what we're doing. The British will know we have sent them to hell, where they will be warmly received. And that's where we stand. So we're now in the position to change history. This is the way it happens. You have two factors in history. You have the so-called objective factor, the way things are moving, the perception of interest, the fears, the hopes of people. And you would say, well, why don't these things control politics at all times? Well, it doesn't. You come to a change in a general mood, which is the kind of thing that Shelley refers to in the close of his In Defense of Poetry. People, in large, are gripped by something which they do not always understand, but it compels them to act in a certain way, it perceived in their own interest, and generally often represents a nobler quality aroused in that people than they had represented before. The American Revolution is typical of that. It happened here. It was an isolated situation. We weren't in Europe. And the Americans here realized they had to defend what they had established in North America, and they did it. They had support from people in Russia, France, Spain, and elsewhere. And we won our freedom. We won our republic. We won also the fight against the British in the Civil War. We won the fight against slavery. We won the fight against backwardness in general. We won the fight to develop the Western lands. We won the fight to unify the nation as a transcontinental nation from the Atlantic shore to the Pacific shore. We did that as a people in this way. We suffered long periods of suffering while we waited for this reform to take place. But the power of the reform, like a tidal movement, came upon us, and we were mobilized. When we found suitable leaders, we responded to them, and they saved us. What you see in the McCain-Cantwell initiative is a timely response, a response to the instinctive reaction of the American process to a threat to our existence. Admittedly, most citizens don't understand fully what this is about, but they know the effects. They smell the doom coming down upon them. They know something needs to be done. And when someone says, like John McCain, Senator Cantwell, and others, when they say we are mobilizing to defend this nation from this awful thing, from this breakdown crisis that threatens us all, and you all know your jobs are lost, your cities are hopeless, your water systems are breaking down, everything is going to hell. You cannot sit there. You've got to do something to change the situation. You cannot let this continue the way it's going. If you find a point. Some politicians, some leading figures, as usually happens in anything like this, some leading figures step forward. They talk to each other. They explore. They're cautious at first. Then they begin to discover they're attracting more members around them into the same cause. They smell the acquisition of power, political power and influence. Now they say, we can jam the works up. We can jam the works up with the Glass-Steagall action. And Glass-Steagall action is now the thing. It's on the agenda. The other things are waning. This is it. You're either with Glass-Steagall or you're not in the real world. That's the situation. Do we have the power at this moment to ram this through? Not quite yet. Not quite yet. But after my remarks today, which will be heard and will be discussed by relevant people, I'm not actually directly conspiring with them, but they know what I'm doing and I know what they're doing. We don't really disagree very much, because the thing that unites us, even though we come from different backgrounds, is we're all patriots. That's the difference. And those who oppose us are not really patriots, and that's the difference. When the American people are aroused and have a clear cause and clear leadership, they will respond accordingly, and they're beginning to respond right now. When what's going to happen in Europe in the coming days is going to shape this thing, because the European system is now coming down. The enactment of the Greek bailout has implications which mean the present European monetary financial system is now doomed. It has no life expectancy. It's going to disintegrate. The British Empire is going to disintegrate. The British Empire is going to make threats against the United States because of this Glass-Steagall form. And it's only the British that are sympathetic to the opposition to Glass-Steagall now, or people who are duped by British influences, one kind or another. And Europe will go down. But if the United States is organized around a Glass-Steagall reform, what will happen? We will take, and most of this money that Wall Street claims to own and similar kinds of people will vanish, gone. We discover it's monopoly money. We don't have to honor it. It's gone. Well, that means that a lot of banks are going to go. Not all of them, because we can also rescue some banks. What we do is we walk into a bank with a Glass-Steagall wit in our hands, and we say, we're going to sort out your accounts. Now, some of this big bucket over here, that's the wastebasket. And most of your financial claims are going to vanish from here as they go into that wastebasket. Now, you have a small amount over here. The wastebasket is full of quadrillions of dollars, of worthless dollars. And what you will salvage is a very smallest part of the total monstrous mass. What will we do? Well, the United States has now rid itself of these debts to these swindlers from London and from New York, and from Chicago, too. We're not going to honor. Their money is now declared worthless. Their assets are declared worthless, are declared to be bunk. What happens? Well, if we have the right leadership in the United States government, everybody will join. Or nearly everybody will join. Some will complain, but they will join. Why do they join? They want to survive. They need to be tapped into whoever has got the real money. And they will go along with that, especially if it's a fair deal. And therefore, we're going to create a mass of loans, federal loans, on federal credit. We're going to utter it under a Glass-Steagall standard. Well, and we're going to start funding the banks that we save. We're going to take the parts of the banks that are worthless, that are parasitical, we're going to throw it away. It's gone. It's monopoly money. We don't play monopoly money war here, not in the banking community. You try to play it, you're out. All right, so now we've got a much more modest banking system, rid of all these parasites. And what do? Well, the federal government can now utter money, utter credit in the congressional way. It goes into what? Into legitimate banks, mercantile banks, or similar kinds of banks, to save savings banks and mercantile banks generally. And the other kind of thing, better gone sooner than later. So therefore, what will we do? Well, we don't have much in the way of building an economy anymore. We've pretty much destroyed, especially in the past 3 years, under the succession of George III and Obama. But what we've got is a shambles of what we once had in terms of industries and infrastructure, like the water systems of the United States. A time has passed. Time has passed since 1966, 68. In 1966, 68, we reached a 0 point and started going down in basic economic infrastructure. As smart guys did what they did, they took used to have a water system, a municipal water system. A municipality, as a corporation, would own the water system. And the water system would have employees who performed all the essential functions, including clean water, that sort of thing, repairing the pipes, maintaining the system. But then they decided they could save money by farming it out to private interests. And the private interests would not maintain the full repair of the water systems. So therefore, you have in the cities and towns of the United States, you have many of them have lost their water system. The water system is, 60 or 100 years old. It's never been repaired. And we have a catastrophic rate of breakdown of municipal water systems, because we employ cheap labor with no pension guarantees, with none of these things that we used to give to public corporations, which would serve community for water systems, for example. We have similar processes with the power systems. All the kinds of things that we used to get from municipalities and state organizations are gone, are broken down. So what will we do? We will take two categories of infrastructure. When this money we issue through this new act, under the authority of a new Glass-Steagall Act, the federal government will now utter credit, which it will distribute in various ways, either directly in some cases, or where it's an investment, we will often prefer to loan it to cities, municipalities, or to private corporations for their investment. We think the investment is a sound one, it's productive, it's creative, we'll do that. Now, the major part is going to be on infrastructure, because we don't have industry anymore. We don't have really independent agriculture anymore. It's controlled by international agriculture, like Monsanto, which claims it invented life. I don't know where they got that patent from, what screwball passed that thing through. So we've got a lot of unemployed people. We've got to put them back to useful work. We've got to care for them. We've got to bail out the communities that are threatened with jeopardy, like these water crises, which all up and down the traditional cities and towns of the United States are now in jeopardy in water supply. And that's really a serious problem. Healthcare problems. We've ruined the healthcare system under the Nixon administration, going to the HMO system, even before this mass murderous system voted in by fools under Obama. So our population is threatened by the stupidity of governments from the time that somebody assassinated John Kennedy to prevent him from opposing going into a war in Indochina. And he was murdered to clear the way for a war in Indochina that the British wanted us to have. And since that time, we've been going downhill. So we've got a ruined economy, but we have American people, and we have an American tradition. We have a knowledge of what we used to do. We have understanding of science, and I'll get into that in the second part of what I'm going to say today. We have the options. So we'll invest in infrastructure. But in addition to going back to fixing up the possibility of living in communities which are no longer just breaking down, where the water systems are being repaired, where transportation systems, educational systems, healthcare systems are being restored again, we're going to do some major things. We're going to build a worldwide, international railway magnetic levitation transportation system. Every continent except Australia will be united and connected and in depth by an international rail system or in the form of a magnetic levitation system. So it is much cheaper and more efficient in many ways to transport goods over by rail than by shipping. Shipping is less efficient, more costly than high-speed rail and magnetic levitation. We're going to connect the continents. From the Bering Straits, I understand Hinkle died, the former governor of Alaska, who was a supporter of this, active supporter of the Bering Straits Bridge. And so we will connect all of Eurasia, Africa fully, by rail system and power systems and healthcare systems, that sort of thing. A system of infrastructure. We will reach from the Alaska Straits down to the tip of South America. The whole area will become one area of development, continuing the intention of the Lincoln administration in installing the Transcontinental Railway. We're going to build a world system among nation states, sovereign nation states, which is capable of being the vehicle for recovery of the world economy. We are also going to have to do is to, of course, develop new industries. We're going to change the character of the U.S. economy. For example, we have destroyed much of the development which existed in the central and western lands of the United States. We destroyed it. We built super congestion around Washington, D.C., for example, which is insane. You used to have an industrial development or municipal development of a finite size and a finite area. No? Then you would have an area between that and the next city, which was journey toward rural and involved agriculture. The idea was, in the old days, was to have townships and cities built where you could commute to work in less than a half an hour each way, each day, preferably 15 minutes. And to provide mass transit systems for people to be able to do that in a short period of time. Today, we have people commuting around Washington for an hour and a half to 2 hours each way, each day. What does that do to the family life? What does that do to the culture of the society? Similar kinds of things. The schools are a mess. So we're out of our infrastructure of the nation and among nations is wrong. We have to build that infrastructure. It's a high speed, it's a big investment, it's a long-term investment. We have to do it. But that long-term investment and water systems, transportation systems, power systems, so forth, and in space systems. I'll get to that later. These investments will be the driver for distributing credit into the new industries which will spring up as a result of this reform. In other words, what's the market for industry? The market and for the products of industry. The market lies largely in the federal government's role in organizing credit for basic economic infrastructure. The jobs you create in infrastructure become the echo and the stimulant for the jobs you create in industries which supply support for the undertaking of building the infrastructure. Like the Tennessee Valley Authority under Roosevelt. Perfect example of what I mean. We can do TVA-type approaches throughout the world. These are not some kind of trick. These are essential. Therefore, if the federal government, through the mercantile banking system, now under the Glass-Steagall system, can supply credit, we will deliver credit under the old Roosevelt-style precautions. We'll deliver that credit through banking institutions in order to fund investments in necessary production in private industry. And that's the way we'll build the economy. We have a population which has been ruined over the recent 20 to 30 years. It's no longer productive. We have a whole layer of youth who are absolutely unqualified for employment in anything except masturbation. And therefore, we got to do something with them, and we have to go back to the example of what Roosevelt did in the 1930s, typified by the CCC. You've got to take these young people who have no qualifications for honest work, get them off dope, get them to live a normal life and start to organize a normal life. Well, we did that with the CCCs. We took these young people and we put them in camps where they would do useful work, as in forestry, for example. Now, we got, for example, a famous military division out of Michigan on the basis of this program in Michigan alone. And these fellows did a fair job in fighting World War II in Europe. So therefore, then they became a part of the essential basis for our industrial potential in that part of the world when they returned, of those that did return. So that's the way we do it. We invest in things, and we get social programs of investment which will channel people from uselessness into initial skills and then into the ability to have a full spectrum of productive capabilities. And enough of that so that the entire population is in it. We're going to eliminate a lot of so-called social work and other kinds of entertainment. But you get a higher ratio of actually physically productive work. And that's what we have to do. So that approach will work. And what we're forced to do, as McCain and Cantwell and others are doing, in this initiative they've launched now, which is you're going to find this spreading very, very rapidly throughout the entire political system. The system is not going to look the same a week from now as it does today. It's going to change. And the Obama administration is doomed. One way or the other. Either the United States doesn't do this and we go to hell, and then he's gone that way, or we decide to become sensible and he's gone that way. He's out. We'll have a nice plantation someplace where he can be kept as a museum piece and well-fed, nourished, but away from people. That's the way we treat our mental cases. We try to protect them, take care of them, be humane, provide a safe place where they were not going to be harmful to other people. And that's the way you have to do with him. So it'll be changed one of these two ways. And the change is coming on now. What will happen? Well, you're going to find that the Republican and Democratic Party are going to all reassort themselves. They'll reassort themselves according to national interest. There'll be those who, we see it now, right now, with this coalition around McCain and Cantwell. The party lines are being crossed. Why? Because the party lines are no longer relevant to the people, to the citizens. So those who will stand up on one side will be maybe not new parties, but to be a coalition of people who stand for one set of principles as opposed to those who oppose it. And that is going to happen very rapidly if we are to survive. Now, what is the long-term view of this thing? Well, I'm having a lot of fun. I have a number of young people associated with me who represent a very significant quality of talent. And we have a thing we call the basement, which is only a name for a part of the whole operation. And we are in the process, we do this basement operation is a scientific operation, which is services and intellects a lot of our youth work and other work. But we've recently decided we're in a position to go further. And it's quite relevant to all of this because, and I've said this on several occasions before, I'll say it again right now. People live and die. And as they're still living and about to die, or think they might be about to die, they think about burial or something tantamount to burial. They think about being tucked away as a dead person someplace where their memory, the memory of their existence as typified by tombstones and cemeteries, will suggest to them that there was a purpose in their having lived. A purpose in life. And if you take that away from people, if they don't have a sense of a purpose in having lived, once they face the reality of death, at which point they have only one thing, the sense of an importance, a purpose in their having lived. They're not monkeys, they're not animals, they're people, they're thinking people, creative people. And therefore, this is the thing that really gives the glue to society and its future. Does my life, is this whole story about resurrection merely a story to quiet us down? Or is there something in which we participate during our lifetimes which will mean something for humanity into the indefinite future of mankind? The problem is that we have so many attempts to deal with that requirement, because most people who are decent people, always think in those terms. They think in terms of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That's one way of expressing it. They remember in their family circles and otherwise in their communities the people who are deceased, what they did, what they contributed, and we honor them. And we hope that our passing will build a score for us that we too are honorable in the future of humanity after we've passed on. Can we say, though, that mankind is really going to pass on successfully in this way? Is there really a meaningful connection between our living now and our descendants and the communities we live in? Are we really doing something of which mankind can be proud? Indefinitely to all future generations? Can we say mankind, whatever happens to the universe, mankind will remain a useful, powerful force for good in the universe? And do we actually think about that in a way which corresponds to scientific reality? Well, since, a very elementary thing is our solar system is a fairly young system in our galaxy. And the sun is a young sun. You can call it a son of this or son of that, but it's a young sun. And the planetary system which it has is something it spun off and developed when it was young. And you have these planets, but you have also, it's not going to stay this way forever. We look at the history of galaxies, for example. Planets come and go, suns come and go. And we're stuck on Earth with this sun. We're gambling the future of all humanity on the assumption that this sun is not going to blow up on us, which it will do eventually anyway, unless we find some way to control it. And the Earth is going to become uninhabitable long before that time. So where is the future of humanity? Where can a human being who's conscious of what it is to be a human being find the succor of a certainty that humanity is going to exist? And only animals don't have that, only human beings. And if we don't have that assurance, then what happens to our morality? Then it becomes whatever we choose as a fantasy to replace the lack of certainty. The main function of society has to be recognized now, especially in this present time of crisis, that we have to give mankind a credible assurance that we, the existing population today, as well as those who came before us, will find a meaning in their having lived in the future of mankind throughout the existence of this universe to come. Until we do that, we have not really given a rational response to the desire of any sensible person to hope that the outcome of their life is meaningful for humanity. Now, in the United States, in its creation, there was a very strong element of that belief and that commitment. In the recent generations, we have lost that. That was lost when we decided to go green. I guess what's happened to your body when you go dead, it turns green. So we've gone green. We no longer we no longer think in terms of what if the sun is going to blow up? Are we making steps or taking steps to prepare for dealing with that eventuality, to maintain humanity despite that threat? Are we developing scientific knowledge and capabilities which lead in that direction? Are we learning how to go to different planets for a temporary stopping place on our way out to some distant part of the galaxy or some new galaxy? Are we thinking in those directions? I am. Why shouldn't you? Now, I've got some young fellows here, and they are willing to do that. It's our basement program. We are now dealing with the practical program of how we can work out, and it's not that easy. There's no simple thing. It's going to take a lot of work. How can we put mankind, or some people, safely on the planet Mars? How can we safely transport them on the planet Mars, now that we know some of the problems of long-distance flight in space travel, the biological problems? We think these problems are solvable, what we've been doing. We're working on it. And we're harking back to a current in modern science which was thinking in that direction. The current in modern science which gave us the original initiative for space travel. The other thing we have from what we know of space science in terms of for example, the Kennedy thrust for reactivating space science. We, at the beginning of the 1970s, our assessment of the space program was that our investment in the science of the space program gave us 10 cents of potential, productive potential, for every penny we spent on the actual program. The science program was the most beneficial program we had, with the highest rate of return through pure scientific development. And what happened, we were shutting it down from the middle of the 1960s on. What we launched in the moon landing and so forth was a product of what had already been previously accomplished in terms of scientific terms. And we began to lose that capability that we had been given even while we were doing the initial space explorations. So there we have now a history of where the world was going with space science, which is in this relevant direction. If we can say that we are prepared, if necessary, in some future time, when necessary, to transport humanity to safe places away from a dangerous sun and a dangerous condition on Earth. If we can say that, then we have a moral authority for the organization of society around a sense of purpose. And we don't have to have fake explanations of this. That's our destiny. We are a very peculiar species. No other species is like us. And we're going to save that species. We're going to assure that if you do something good in your lifetime, that the benefit that you generate will be preserved to the advantage of future generations. And that's humanity. You're tied morally, spiritually to the future, the people of the future and the people of the past. You feel like a real human being which has a purpose for existing in this universe. So we are concentrating on something which will become successful, particularly if we get this thing going and solving the problem immediately before us. Because the great fakery that we have to deal with today is money is fake. The conception of money is fake. Money is not a measure of value. Money was a vehicle which we used, as in the Massachusetts Bay Colony and in other good cases, we used money as a system of credit which was necessary to organize society for certain kinds of projects which are physically beneficial to society and to its well-being, health, and so on, and freedom. So that is the real meaning of economy, is the contributions to the future of humanity through a commitment to discovering new ways of solving old and new problems. This is physical. It is not monetary. The monetary system is a convenient way of organizing exchanges. And in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, before the Andros takeover, that system was already working. That is a peculiar American system. And the foundations of the American system were laid there in Massachusetts during that period, in that time. And our design of economy was always based on that, at all good times. So let's go back to it and say, now let's look not at money economy, let's look at physical economy. And let's say that money is necessary as currency in an economy, but it's not the purpose of the economy. It's a means of organizing the efforts of an economy. The value of what is produced lies in the value for humanity, not in a money value. The money value is simply a way of organizing production and distribution. So let's look at things in that way for a change. What is physical economy? That's the real economy. How do you increase the productive powers of labor? What do you need to produce to solve these challenges for humanity? What is the physical science you need to master to understand how you can increase the power of a person productivity per capita, even under conditions in which the richness of resources is being lessened, relatively, by depletion of the more precious resources, like iron or other things. And how do we do that? Well, we get new technologies, we go to higher energy flux densities of production, all these kinds of things. They're all physical. Well, you go back and where does the solution to this thing come from? You have a gentleman who was important even during the beginning of the end of the last century, Max Planck, who founded a branch of science. It's called physical economy. Physical chemistry as such, but physical economy as well. And his work led to the work of such geniuses and other followers of Bernard Riemann, as Albert Einstein, for example, as William Draper Hawkins, as Vladimir Vernadsky, and others. And these people who were followers of the school of science of Riemann, Bernard Riemann, made a revolution during the course from the time of Planck's early discoveries up until a recent time. And these discoveries give us access to understanding some of the primitive problems which face us in space travel. If we want to send people into space, we've got problems we have to solve. And it's only by thinking in terms of a physical science and defined in these terms of physical chemistry that we have been able to crack this. We also have the fact that space is not empty. We got a program on this one too. It's going on in the basement. It's only in the primitive stages, but it's going to be very important. In which there is no empty space. Between Earth orbit and Mars orbit, there's no empty space. You may not see it because you don't have the sense organs to sense it as a sensory experience directly. But it's out there. It's all kinds of cosmic radiation. Thick with it. If you want to go to Mars on an accelerated scale, which you have to do because you're 300 days in space travel at an idle speed, is not very good for your health. You might arrive as a piece of blubber. So you need some special conditions, and you have to do it fairly expeditious to take this trip. And we have to plow through that area and there are many other implications. So we are actually pulling together odds and ends of people who have contributions to make to this area of science. And the importance is, the moral importance of this for this occasion here, the subject here, is we need to give young people who are totally demoralized and others who have become demoralized, we need to give them a clear sense that there's a road we're going to travel, which is going to lead in the direction of certain kinds of things which must occur. And this includes this area of the development of this Department of Physical Science, which involves some very important changes. We only have a preliminary sketch of what the nature of the problem is. A great amount of research is going to be required. It will take several generations to do the kind of things we're talking about, even on optimal conditions. But we have to give mankind a new moral perspective, more durable than the fragile ones we have had before. And we should go into this crisis, because when you walk out on the streets from here, and you say, well, the Glass-Steagall revival has occurred, you're still going to see destitution. You're going to see mass unemployment, crummy conditions. How do you say you can walk out to that with optimism if you do not have a clear sense of building the future? And therefore you need to have a teaching of physical science, for example, which is consistent with that moral concern. Not that you're going to go to another galaxy now in your lifetime. I certainly am not. So I don't have any illusions about that. But I do have a concern about what comes after me, which is the normal thing for any healthy human being. And I have to think about what I'm contributing to what comes after me. And I have to think in terms of a satisfactory answer to those questions. Can I say that what I think is coming after me, in some sense, is valid? And that's a matter of science. And what we have to do is shift the teaching of science and teaching of economics away from what we've been conventionally concerned with. Money. Who's got the money? Who's got the money? And you see how worthless money is today since Greenspan came in. So therefore, we have to have a more durable conception of the value of man, of the value of our work, and the value of the future we hope we are creating. And let's take this occasion, which I know will be, it's the only thing that's worth it important right now, because it's going to determine the course of future history. Is the Glass-Steagall reform, which is now on the table, going to be immediately implemented to prevent the United States from joining the British in going to hell? Because if not, we don't have a future, at least not for a long time to come. If we do, then it is a future. And then once we decide that we're going to do that, how do we maintain the morale, the moral character of our populations? We do that by providing them the assurance of a knowable, understandable science education and practice, where they can understand in their own terms of reference, at least in a good approximation, that mankind has a future, and that we must organize our policy not simply for our comfort, we must do that, but we must organize our policy with a view to what is going to happen to future generations of humanity. We have to earn the respect of future humanity, that we are not only providing solutions for these problems, or the seed of solutions, but we are creating a system of commitment which will ensure that we will continue to progress in that direction indefinitely, and will give people some sense of what the practical measures are which we can lead to that result. So let's take the issue of the collapse of society, the collapse of the present world system, which is now ongoing, which exploded in your face on Thursday in the stock market, and which is going to explode in a higher form this coming week, because it's already exploding. Are you going to respond to this with this change, which I indicate, the Glass-Steagall reform? Otherwise, if you're not going to respond to the Glass-Steagall reform now, you're wasting your time by being alive. Is that true? This is the only thing that's morally significant. Are we willing to commit ourselves to this Glass-Steagall perspective now that leading political forces have put the thing on the table? It's the only thing that will save us, and there's nothing else worth doing. Anything else is a damn waste of time. Just babble. So let's take the position. Understand the crisis. We can solve it. We have a core of recognized American leaders who are now leading an effort which will grow very rapidly, not only in the United States, but will grow also by reputation in Europe and elsewhere. Let us assume that we're going to win, because there's no time worth spending on the alternative. You're looking at hell or heaven. And once you made the choice, then you better start exploring heaven. Not going there fast, but that may happen, but in terms of you are committed to ensure that our victory over the enemy, our victory through initiation of a Glass-Steagall reform, will empower actions which will lead to the salvation of mankind from the kind of threat that's immediate. And once we do that, we have to think seriously about what are the characteristics of the moral standard by which society should make policies. And I suggest that we have to think in terms of the new physics, the new form of the physics, of physical chemistry, typified by the gentleman I've named, and use that as a standard of challenge for the missions of mankind. Every generation and every group of generations must have a mission. For example, some of you in this room are in your 20s. Some are in the 30s. Some are somewhat older, like me. So therefore, what are we going to contribute to the future of mankind? What's our ability? What's the roadmap we have to work out for the future of mankind? That's what's needed. Anyway, so we will now have some questions thrown at me, and you can observe the spectacle.